All right. Welcome to our Wednesday forum. We're glad that you're able to attend. We're grateful that our panelists are here to help us talk about our social and emotional learning process here in the Iron County School District. And so we're going to rely on them a lot today. Welcome to those who are participating as well. Thank you for being here. And hopefully the information that we share today will be a benefit to you guys and help you understand how we're helping students in today's world, which is becoming more and more interesting by the day as we have the pandemic and all those things, and kids coming back from being out of school for so long. So we've had to work on getting some things in place to help them work back into school and get through some of those things that they need to get through. So welcome. I'm going to have the panel just go ahead and introduce themselves. If you guys could do that and then give a little bit of a brief description of where you're working and kind of what you do for your job here in the district. Belinda, go ahead and start. You're on mute, Belinda.
I'm Belinda Murray. I'm the principal at Cedar Middle School.
Alan?
I'm Alan Garrett. I'm one of the district psychologists.
Lavona?
I think she went out and is coming back in to see if she can see it on video. If it's not going to work, I'll just have her come and take my seat here.
Okay. So Lavona Montgomery is also one of the panelists here, and she is a district school psychologist as well. Roy?
Roy Matthews, secondary director, and formerly the principal at Parowan High School.
So did I get everybody? I think I did, didn't I? And then Karen Johnson is our facilitator here, and Karen works in the district office as well. So just kind of a quick brief background on how this kind of came about. And then I'm going to have each one of these individuals kind of talk about their process and how they were involved in implementation of our social and emotional process in our district. So I think it was four years ago, we kind of came together as a district team. It was kind of started in the special education department, and we were having behaviors that were becoming more and more significant and more students being involved in our district. And we were needing to make some decisions on how we were going to process this and how we were going to get through this. So one of the things that we were hearing from some of our teachers is that each school was probably going to have anywhere from, I don't know, 5, 6 to 10 students that were having significant behavior problems. And so some of them were calling for a behavior unit and things like that in our district. And so we took a field trip. These individuals here, I believe, were involved with that field trip. At least some of them were, I know that. And we went to Provo School District and the Nebo School District and looked at their behavior units to see if that was something that we felt like that we could accommodate in our district. As we went through those were great. They did a great job up there. Provo School District has multiple behavior units, as well as Nebo does too. And so we were able to look at each one of those districts and kind of talk with the individuals there and see how they were functioning. So when we came back, we kind of got together and kind of came to the conclusion that really philosophically didn't feel right, that we didn't want to really deal with a behavior unit, and we wanted to kind of go a different direction. And so this is where I'm going to allow these others to kind of jump in. So Alan and Lavona, I think this is kind of where you need to tell your story a little bit about kind of where we took off from that point and how you guys came to understand about ACEs and San Francisco Unified School District. So go ahead. Alan, Lavona, one of you two.
Well, so we had seen a couple of documentaries, one of them being Paper Tigers and the other one was Resilience, and felt like that was something that helped us give us some direction as far as where we wanted to go with social emotional learning. Talked a lot about trauma and trauma-informed practices, and Lavona was the one that kind of jump-started all this, and I kind of just followed in and helped her organize it. Well, she organized it, but and she was really the one that found and organized the whole San Francisco trip, trying to figure out what we needed to do to make this happen in our district, because what we were seeing is some of the same things, not necessarily like they are in San Francisco or any big inner city school, but still some behaviors and some things that were concerning to us. And we wanted to be able to give students resources to be able to help them be successful emotionally and socially in school. And we knew if we didn't address those issues that we would struggle with the academic portions, just because the behaviors are the things that sort of rear their heads and then don't allow students to make that progress academically. So after visiting San Francisco and seeing what they had to offer there and what they were doing, we felt like we could adapt that to what we needed in our district. And as a group, we met together and talked about what that might look like. And so that's kind of how it started. And that was our role. And we were kind of the ones that looked at the different things and then brought it back and put it before the group. And then we all made decisions as far as how we thought this needed to go, as far as starting out with some pilot schools and figuring out how we can roll this out district wide, and why we thought this is important and critical for students. Just because we felt like they needed to have some skills to be able to meet the challenges they might be facing or might be facing in the future. And so that was kind of the reason that we went the direction we went. Lavona, do you have anything to add to that description?
Well, I think one of the largest pieces was that without understanding what trauma is, we're more likely to misinterpret trauma-related behaviors as maybe, a student would maybe be struggling with just being able to interact with peers appropriately, or some physical or verbal aggression that we might be seeing. And that being able to understand how trauma affects all aspects of students' lives, we just felt like as a committee that would be the best route to take, that we should avoid ineffective or stigmatizing or punitive practices as reactions to trauma impacted students. We needed to understand how trauma and stress can affect students, their relationships, their ability to organize, their health, even their accessing of general curriculum. So, so just reframing how we were looking at some of those behaviors and recognizing the effects more accurately, it just leads the district to be more compassionate and strength-based and more effective, frankly, in response to any trauma-impacted student. If we can help promote healing as opposed to reacting in ways that might inadvertently re-traumatize someone, then that was important to take into account.
So a couple of things I think that I think we saw as we went there that were important for us, or that we kind of pulled away or took away from San Francisco, was the fact, and we looked at their Hearts program that they use there, and we came away with wellness rooms, licensed clinical social workers, and some of those ideas that we felt like that we could incorporate into our schools. One of the things that as the director of special programs in the district that has been on my mind quite a bit is the fact that sometimes our students don't have access or can't have access to that emotional and social help that they so desperately need for various reasons. And it can be not attending school, or parents don't take them to appointments, or lots of different things. Being able to incorporate them into our culture, into our school, I think has significantly increased the ability for us to access those students and to help them more with the things that they need. So do you guys have anything, Lavona and Alan, do you guys have anything else to add with that from San Francisco and some of the things that we pulled away?
Well, I just think that the biggest thing too, and Lavona kind of alluded to this, is that the behavior is a symptom of the underlying problem. And what we wanted to do is to get to the real problem. That was the goal of the whole wellness rooms and social workers, is that we wanted to get to the heart of the issue so we could really solve the problem and not just have a Band-Aid to cover it. It was a way to help us see the child, the whole child.
So being preventative and not reactionary, I think. And I think when you look at schools, in the past, that's what we've become. We had become reactionary to behaviors. We have the same discipline process and procedures that we always used. And so looking at it differently now from a perspective of being preventative, I think it adds a lot more to what we're able to do for those students to help them to not reach that level or that area. So anything else that you guys have about that part? Okay, so
I guess
go ahead, Alan.
I was just going to mention that and this was important too, we realized that we need to look at kids differently, but having done that and looking at trauma-informed practices, we realized we needed a curriculum to help them to be even more proactive. And that was kind of where our yoga and mindfulness came in, to help them learn how to self-regulate. And so we tried to add that. We added that in as well, because that was sort of the way to help us teach them the skills they needed to be able to access inner and outer resources to be able to self-regulate.
Well, and through our study and visits of the HEARTS program out in San Francisco, we came to the understanding that trauma can derail the development of healthy skills, whether that's regulating emotions, thinking patterns, behaviors, healthy interpersonal skills, all of those things, and finding ways to promote wellness practices in each one of our buildings and build a sense of community for students that might not have that outside of our classrooms. So we wanted to make sure that we were helping kids develop to their fullest potential, and sometimes addressing those other needs help us to accomplish that. So I think our wellness centers actually serve as a nice forum to meet a lot of these different needs.
And I think that needs to be expressed too. I think that's made one of the, single most differences in our schools is the wellness rooms, and they're non-punitive. I think that sometimes comes across as being a free-for-all, but that's not the case at all. The data that we get for students that actually visit the wellness room, we're able to manage that fairly well. But for it to be effective and for it to be successful, it has to be a non-punitive place for kids to go and self-regulate. And we kind of found that out. So right now, what I'd like to do is have Belinda first and then Roy talk about, you guys went with us to San Francisco and you saw things, and you were our pilot schools. So kind of maybe talk a little bit about what that looked like and how you implemented that into your own schools.
Okay, so I was really impressed with what I saw at San Francisco. It's a different world there, so not everything we saw we could take back or would even be appropriate in Cedar City in our community, but there was a lot that we could take and adjust. So one thing I continue to refer back to is behavior as like an iceberg. You only see the little bit at the top. That's the behavior. You don't see everything underneath that's causing it. And there's always a function for a child's behavior, whatever that might be. And so our job is to figure out what's the function, why are they behaving the way they are, and let's help give them skills to choose alternate behaviors or to behave appropriately for the setting they're in. And so like an iceberg, behavior can sink an entire ship, which would be our classrooms. And so it's hard for, our classrooms are middle school classrooms, so our teachers have 30 kids. And it was really hard for our teachers to stop everything they were doing to focus on a child that was having a struggle in a moment and try to fix that. So we really used our wellness room, which we call our CHAMPS room. CHAMPS stands for calm, healthy, appropriate, motivated, prepared, and successful. And the teachers chose that. That's everything they want the students to be when they leave that room to go back to class. So we really wanted to be able to have the students go to that room and then work on strategies they could use to de-escalate. And I think about the CHAMPS room, even as adults, we self-regulate. We go to the garage, if that's our thing, to work on cars when we're upset, or go to the bathroom and lock the door or go outside. But we as adults self-regulate. And if we need to get away from the family for a minute or get away from the situation, that's a skill that we want our students to have and we want them to understand. And so often when they're in a classroom, they have to have a bathroom pass, they have to have all these things. And so when they're in the moment, feel like they're going to blow or something upsets them, you know, they have a memory or they just get emotional about something. I feel strongly they should have that same option to be able to self-regulate and choose. And so, but they need to have a safe place they can go. So and when I mean safe, I mean supervised. So we chose the Champs room. They go down there and they can choose to talk or not talk. So if we have a student that's pretty good at self-regulation, which most of our students are, and just need a minute to pull themselves together, because at middle school it is embarrassing to be emotional around your peers, because then it becomes a huge deal. Everybody wanting to know what's wrong and everybody circling around. So if all they need is just a minute to pull themselves together, maybe they got in an argument with parents before school, which happens a lot with teenagers, or they didn't get up in time and they felt rushed, whatever it might be, or they have a test and they didn't study and they're kind of panicking for a moment. Or even we've had students go down there because their dog died. And that's a big deal for a middle schooler. And so they can take a minute, they can choose to talk to the person that mans that room or not, but we do have a time limit. So they can't be down there all day. And we do track when the student comes. So just so we can watch for patterns to see, are they always coming during PE? And if they are always coming during PE or during math, what's the trigger, why? And then we can work with that student and talk with that student and find some solutions. And so we found that room to be so helpful for our students. And our hope is that they grow out of having to need that room, that they learn those self-regulation skills and they don't need to use it as much. But, you know, I have one student, an example that in 6th grade, that student would come to my office and be so upset and pound their head on my desk and cry and just be so upset. And by the time they left middle school in 8th grade, they didn't go to that room once the last semester because they didn't need to. They really learned strategies on how to, when they're feeling upset, how to regulate themselves and how to calm themselves down and how to deal with that in a socially appropriate way. And it was just so nice to be able to send that student to high school and know that they're just going to fit in and they're going to be great and have a good time. So that's really the purpose of that room. And then the next step our school took is we had implemented the room, the Champs room, and we have 2 guiding committees at our school. Well, 3, community council, which is a parent and teacher committee. And then we also have our guiding coalition that works on academics. And then we have our PBIS committee, which stands for Positive Behavior Intervention Support, and they really guide all things behavior. And as we sat in the PBIS committee, the teachers kind of kept saying over and over, you know, our students just don't have a lot of growth mindset. They get frustrated so easily. They don't have a lot of perseverance. We need to find some way to teach them that. So we started looking for a program that we could use in the classroom that the teachers could use to teach the students these lifelong skills of how to be prepared, how to persevere, how to get along with friends when you have a dispute, which happens even as adults. So just some basic social and academic skills. And so we looked at quite a few curriculums and settled on one last year called 7 Mindsets that we used for a year, that the teachers really liked, the students really liked. And then this year there was some money and a committee was formed and the district moved to 360, which we really like as well. And so as a PBIS committee, we're getting ready to use 360. And what we've done is sat down and gone through all the lessons, and the teachers from those grades have gone through and really thought about what are the issues they're seeing for their students this year, and look at the 360 lessons and say that lesson would address that issue. And then they'll be teaching those lessons whole class during advisory time. And I love that, again, we're looking at what are some issues that the kids are dealing with that we could help them, give them some extra strategies, and just giving strategies and teaching that whole class, which has been helpful to have those lessons ready made so my teachers don't have to come up with them. So that tier 1 instruction and that instructing perseverance and organization and some of those things was really kind of the missing piece for us. And once we started doing that, we saw that really helped a lot of our students. Because it's always good a reminder, I think as adults, we seek out to study and to better ourselves. And however you do that, whatever books or materials you use, that's a good skill as adults. And so we wanted to teach that to our kids. So, and then we also hired some behavior specialists that have come in, and our goal is to keep the kids in class so they can continue learning. So if a student's really struggling, the teachers can text the behavior specialist, they'll come in and again, intervene with that student and just remind them of some skills they've been working on. And more often than not, the student's like, oh yeah. And then they switch around and get right back to work. So it keeps them in the classroom learning, and it keeps the class moving, and the teacher can still be teaching. And so that iceberg isn't sinking because a student is having some concerns with behavior. So that's how we've used it at our school, and feel like it's been pretty effective. Like anything, we make changes and tweaks as we go, and we see things that need to be improved. If we're not looking to improve, I think that we're doing a disservice to our students. So we're constantly trying to improve.
Thanks, Belinda. Appreciate that. Now we have Roy talk about, Roy was the principal at Parowan a couple years ago and was part of that pilot program as well. And I think if he could explain and kind of talk about his process over there, that would be great.
Well, just a little bit about my background, so everybody kind of understands. When I moved to Parowan, I was shocked at how big it was. Kind of a small town Idaho farm boy, and social and emotional learning for us was, kind of suck it up, buttercup. That's the way it is. Which, again, having two solid parents and the way it worked in our home, and always working side by side with parents and on the farm and things like that, that support was really valuable as I became a principal in Parowan and started going to some of our meetings in the county with some of our teams that deal with some pretty traumatic things. My eyes were open pretty good to some issues that I just didn't really think existed. And so when I heard about this and some of the other things that we were trying to do at Parowan, it made sense to try to understand what some of our youth are going through and helping them cope with some of that. And in Parowan, we're true Rams. We're respectful, we're accountable, we make a difference, and we serve others. That's the tier 1 instruction that every student in the building gets, both at the elementary and at the high school. And so communicating that, Belinda mentioned a little bit about positive behavior intervention systems. That's what it is there. And that's our tier 1, helping kids understand, what those values mean, what that looks like. That was kind of foundational. And then Lavona and Alan were great at coming over and helping our staff. We went through training with them on understanding what trauma actually looks like and what some kids actually face and what that does. I mean, I had no idea that if you experience 2 or 3 or 4 different traumatic events in your life, I had no idea that your life expectancy was cut by 10 or 15 years. Like I just didn't understand that. That's not my background. And so I think it was a little bit of an eye opener. It helps us, it helps our teachers in those moments when a student is being very disrespectful and struggling. It helps us understand that, hey, you know what, this might not be personal. Just because he just said I was fat, ugly, and my mom dresses me funny, he really might not be thinking that. It could have been a bad day. That morning, mom and dad were fighting, and I didn't get breakfast, and dad's leaving, and so I just happened to say something in a class, and it triggered that student. I think as I learned that and started to understand that, what that did is it helped me then use the right kind of language as I worked with those students. I would jump back to our tier 1 instruction that we use, which was, hey, you know what? We're true Rams, so I can tell you're having a bad day. Help me understand. I want to treat you with respect. And so actually modeling what respect looks like for a student instead of, hey, you need to be respectful. You're being just, that combative approach, turning that around and trying to de-escalate the situation. I think that's some of my biggest takeaways as we've gone through this process. Yeah, we talk about wellness rooms and how that's accessed. And I think Belinda did a good job of that. And I think that's an important component, and understanding that that's a tier 3 situation. Sometimes 90% of the kids might not access those rooms, but they're there. I'll revert back to my first real suicide attempt as a principal. And I'm not emotional. I'm just retaining water. So if anybody's watching and thinks I'm a baby, this was a great kid from a great family. And nobody really had an idea what the kid was going through. And it just kind of opened my eyes that even in the state of Utah, we lead a lot of other states in teen suicide. Kids do struggle here, and even some of the ones that are coming from great families. And so I think for me, just understanding that concept and having the compassion that we need with our kids is really what being trauma informed is all about, as well as we talk about social and emotional curriculum or learning is, again, if you want to call it character ed or if you want to call it kindness, I don't care what term you put on it, but it is that compassionate side of things and seeing people as people. As soon as you start to see a person as another person, it's hard to be angry at them. It's hard to not be compassionate. So that's been kind of my experience. Again, I could go on for a long time. I don't want to do that, but that's some of the things that as we approach this at Parowan, some of the things that we worked with.
Thanks, Roy. I think part of it, I think it needs to be said too, that when I went to San Francisco, and I think all of us kind of felt this way, that the magic was going to be in being able to get someone in there to help these kids, and that's been part of the magic. But really, I think the key is what goes on in the classroom, what these teachers do with these kids and the relationships that they have with these kids. And really, it comes down to relationships. What kind of a relationship do you have with your students? And our teachers do a great job of creating those relationships. The one thing about our trauma-informed care and our social and emotional learning is that now teachers have tools to be able to help the kids that they haven't had before. And those tools have been successful, whether it be the wellness room, whether it be the access to a social worker that can help them through tough things that, and like Roy said, and Belinda, and all of us that I think are here as panelists here, we've seen a lot of trauma in our students. There's a lot of trauma, and now the teachers and now the school district has tools in place to be able to help those kids work through that and to be able to come out, whole on the other end to help them through those situations. And I think that's kind of the big takeaway for me. And so I guess what I would like to maybe Belinda have you talk a little bit about too is your tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 and what that looks like. And then Roy, maybe talk about what that looked like in your school as well.
Yeah, and for the participants that don't know the school lingo and the acronyms, so the tiers, when we refer to tiers, we use what's called a multi-tiered system of support for our students. And so tier 1 is kind of like the base of a triangle. Everybody gets those supports. And that's just our basic, how we run our school and what we feel every student should have access to. And then tier 2 is if tier 1 isn't working for those students and they need a little extra help, whether that be through academics, social emotionally, through behavior interventions, those kinds of things. They need a little bit of extra support. That's tier 2. And then tier 3 is above and beyond that. So tier 1 and tier 2 aren't working, so we need to add more. And as we move up those tiers, the supports can change either in addition to time, a program, or the intensity of how we do that. So like a reading group would be considered a tier 2. And when we do those at Cedar Middle School, we always have parent permission and a permission slip signed. So I feel really strongly parents need to know what's going on with their student. We need to have those conversations. So if their student if we have a concern that they're not moving along like they should in some aspect, then we have parents do that. So and I see a question from Elaine, from one of our participants, where can parents review the program protocols used in lessons being taught? So if you have a student at my school, you just contact me and I would be happy to show you that and give you, like with 360, there is actually a parent portal that we've set up, the district set up, so you can get in and view those lessons. But since we as a committee have chosen specifically what lessons we want to teach the kids this year, then if you have a student at my school, I'd be happy to sit down and kind of go over that with you. So I hope that answers your question.
And I think that's the case, Belinda, for every school,
Yes,
for anybody that's there. The principal would be the primary contact.
Yeah, for sure. So for tier 1 at our school, Roy mentioned his Para-1 True Ram. We have something similar. It's called Warrior Pride. So we chose an acronym. PRIDE stands for proactive, respect, integrity, dedication, and engagement. It used to stand for excellence, the E. And like I said, we're always seeking to improve, and our teachers really felt like our students aren't engaged. We have a different world than it was when I went to school, and these students are students that sit in front of a video game and have immediate feedback, and they're used to having everything right there in 2 seconds. Problems are solved in a half hour on TV type of thing. And so we changed it to engagement this year because we really wanted to focus on students being more engaged in the classroom. And so we have posters, school-wide expectations that the students are taught through video. And this year with COVID protocols, those videos were sent, some of them out early, so students knew what to expect. And just really talking to the students and training. And our videos are just a lot of fun. We have our student government groups that come, and the teachers are showing what's not appropriate, and the students are correcting and then showing the appropriate way to behave or what the expectations are in certain areas, like the hallway, the bathrooms, outside, the classroom. So we show those videos to the students, and we have lessons that teachers have developed as a committee to talk about those. Every student in our school gets that. It's only fair. As adults, you know that when you go into different situations, you're expected to act differently socially, and we kind of just know what those are. We act differently at the grocery store than we would hanging out with our family, than we would at a concert. But our students at the middle school, we want to make sure that that's explicit and there's no guessing. So we explicitly teach that. That's tier 1. Our social emotional curriculum is tier 1. Every student has access to that. We have what's called Smart Time for academics. So it's our school-wide intervention time. Every student has access to that. That's tier 1 as well. And then as we move up, when we're talking specifically about social emotional learning, our tier 2, as we sit down as counselors, administration, or parents call or email and say, I have a concern about my student. They're having some high anxiety, or they're just having panic attacks all of a sudden, or they're really struggling with school. Or if a teacher comes to us and says, I'm really concerned about this student, then we can move them to tier 2, again, with parent permission. And tier 2 at our school consists of groups that our counselors or our social worker teach. So we have self-regulation groups, just teaching students how to regulate their emotions and recognize where their emotions are and if they're appropriate for that situation, all the way up to DBT groups, which is a therapy group that our social worker runs. Our counselors do anxiety groups. We have friendshipping groups, a divorce group, grief groups, so a wide variety of groups. And if we don't have a group and a parent comes to us with a concern, we create that group so that that student can get some extra help. And we just want to be a support for the parents and the students. And then if we see that a student is in groups and is still struggling and it's not quite working, then we can move to what's called tier 3, where that student can get one-on-one therapy with our social worker, who is a family therapist. And again, that's with parent permission, with parent communication and discussion, because we feel strongly we've got to work as a team. And parents need to know what's going on, and we need to have that open communication. And so that was really nice to be able to add that piece, because in the past, well, when I first started in education, we didn't have anything. No counseling besides our school counselors, and they're great. They're amazing, but they're counselors. They're not therapists. So if we had a student that had some real concerns and the parents had some real concerns, all we could do is refer them to outside agencies, which we work closely with. But let's be honest, sometimes parents can't afford that. Insurance doesn't cover it. Therapy is expensive. And so there were some huge roadblocks for some families in getting their students some help. And there still are with mental health in the state of Utah. It's just hard, I think, in any state. And so I was so happy when we could offer therapy in our school for those parents that chose that we could take away some of those roadblocks and really help their students just learn how to deal with some of the hard feelings they were having. And because like Roy said, even being from, I grew up with a 2-parent, pretty stable family, and was taught expectations and was taught skills to be successful from my family and from my parents, but not every child is that lucky. So that's the tiers at Cedar Middle School. Hope that helped, Kevin.
Thanks, Melinda. So, Roy, let's have you maybe just talk about your tiers and the access to a social worker as well. And then Alan and Lavona, if you guys, after he's done, wouldn't mind talking about mindfulness and yoga and then zones of regulation, whichever one you guys want to take on. Lavona, you could go first and just kind of take which one you want to take, the one that you've been most involved with, and talk about how that's rolled out in our schools. And Alan, you want to take the one that she doesn't and talk about that as well, okay?
Well, I think Belinda kind of explained the tiered system pretty well. So I think one thing that needs to be mentioned is the ability to de-escalate a situation. De-escalate, de-escalate, de-escalate. And so tier 1, again, at Parowan was being a true RAM. If I had students come into my office, I learned quick as a principal, I could turn this into a great conversation and a trust building moment, or I could pretty much turn it into something that was going to require a kid to be suspended. And so back to the tier 1 language. Again, for me, sitting down with a student, one of the first things that I got pretty good at, I don't want to sound not humble, but got good at just saying, hey, do you like to be treated with respect? Because that's what true RAMs are. And it's interesting, kids, even if they're super mad, I have never had a student not answer that question with, yeah, I do like to be treated with respect. And my follow-up would be, okay, at any time as you and I talk, if you don't feel like you're being treated with respect, let me know and we'll stop and we'll discuss that. That's tier 1. That's smart. It's a good de-escalation approach. And to be honest, it helped me. Again, my background is, a little bit old school. I was an old school basketball coach for a lot of years, and it kind of helped me monitor those situations and do a better job. And it also, in that process, models to students, hey, here's an adult treating me maybe different than I've ever been treated in my entire life. And I think that has an impact, and that builds relationships. And then students all of a sudden start seeing maybe authority figures in a different way. And it's interesting because when we would end up working with those students, before long, those are the students coming in and just, hey, how you doing, Mr. Matthews? I just want you to know things are going great this week. And that's to me what this stuff is really all about, is how well you can build relationships with kids. And so I just want to leave people with an understanding that the most important piece to this is that tier one, and teachers and principals being able to use a common language throughout the building that models what we're asking kids to do. I think that's probably the very most important aspect to all this stuff. And then being kind of having a construction background as well. Yeah, it's nice. You're going to encounter different situations, so it's nice to reach into your tool bag when that situation calls for a different tool and look at tier 2 or the tier 3 scenarios. But I still would go back to that tier 1 instruction, modeling, and the language of positive behavior intervention.
So there's a question, thanks Roy, about can a parent review therapist records on group sessions when their child is a part of it? And we have a place where some of that information is put into, it's called Educator Handbook. That becomes part of the student record. And if it is part of the student record, then parents have access to that by FERPA rule. And so that would be something you'd want to visit with your LCSW or therapist in the school. But if it is in Educator Handbook, and that's where those notes go, then parents can view that as their student record. So Alan and Lavona, do you guys want to take on the two topics that I mentioned to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Kevin, let me chime in. Sorry to cut you off, Lavona. Real quick on that student record side of things, as students met with counselors and things like that, and I haven't been the principal at Parowan for a couple of years, but if they met with that counselor, the student record, it just showed, like for me, it was more topic based as opposed to any detail as they meet with the therapist. I think that's also important. So from my experience with that, wasn't maybe some very intimate details of anything that they might have been talking about, but rather just a 30-minute session bullying or 30-minute session with divorce issues or something like that. So something along those lines, not so much any of the details about what they were discussing with the counselor. And I think it should be that way. I think that's more information for parents and students and the therapists themselves. They can work through those details.
Absolutely. Thanks, Roy.
And I was going to add to that too, that most of our social worker, he has a curriculum that he'll follow, just like a teacher would. And so parents could definitely have access to see what curriculum, or, call and say, hey, what did you discuss in groups today? And do that in a way. They obviously have to honor confidentiality of the other students in the group, but they can for sure say, hey, we discussed this today in group, or this topic came up. And I think the same as the principals, anytime you would call a social worker at our buildings, they would be really open to having that conversation. Hope that answers that.
Okay, Lavona, you're up.
Okay, so it's not a secret that today's students are more stressed out than they've ever been before. We have a lot of students that experience extended periods of sedentary screen time, very often with overstimulating media. So all of those things are on the rise, and physical activity is on the decline. So very often our kids are overscheduled or have increased academic expectations that they take on, or maybe some loss of sleep and their diets aren't great. So one of the tools that we decided to implement into the school was the use of yoga, not in its traditional sense, but as a tool that is actually, the curriculum is created for use in schools. So, and there's a lot of activities, team building exercises, mindfulness. That physical component helps provide a little bit of resilience to some of our kids that need that. it's emotional intelligence, if you will, and it just helps to promote self-regulation, relaxation skills. It promotes the mindfulness, the physical activities, social, emotional skill development. It also improves subject retention and test scores. We have implemented in classrooms, and when we first piloted this program, we had wonderful, wonderful math teacher that on the secondary level that wanted to help us collect some data for that. And so I went in every week and we did yoga with her math class. And the data that she was collecting, those test scores improved across the board for her students in the classes that we were implementing that. It increases greater focus and concentration, helps with some communication, some trust, and some empathy, some teamwork, even some leadership skills that they learn through doing this particular curriculum. It just supports healthy, lifelong well-being habits. And we know that trauma can leave students feeling isolated and betrayed sometimes. Maybe they have difficulty trusting others or asking for support, but by fostering relationships that are compassionate and attuned, as well as dependable and trustworthy, we can reestablish trusting connections that foster this healthy well-being. So, so just the added component of the yoga and mindfulness piece, it's research supported. All of the teachers and students that have given any feedback when it's been utilized in their classroom, all of the feedback has been very positive across all subject classes, across all age groups as well. And it's just a powerful vehicle for enhancing learning. So I think that probably, of course, you knew I was going to pick the yoga to talk about because that was my favorite piece that I wanted to add. And I don't know, Alan can probably add his 2 cents about that, but I guess, Alan, you're up.
Thanks, Lavona.
So I'm going to talk about the zones of regulation, and that was actually a piece of our social emotional learning that came before the whole trauma-informed kind of practices that had been around in the schools before that, but very effective way of helping kids understand what their emotions are, and that's the most important part, is that they get an idea of that I have to understand that I'm dysregulated in order to be able to get back and regulated. And the zones do a very good job of describing what it looks like to be in every one of the zones. And I guess I better talk about the zones a little bit so that we understand what the zones are. So the curriculum's taught in a way that it shows different zones or colors that a person could be in, that being green, red, yellow, and blue. And each of those zones is, there are certain feelings in those zones. And so green is the ideal zone, although it's not the zone that we're always trying to get back to. The goal is to regulate in the zone that you're in. Like if I'm in the red zone and I'm upset, then I recognize that I'm upset, and then I attempt to do the skills that I need to get regulated. And it kind of comes back to yoga and mindfulness too. I mean, mindfulness is just a way to help you get in touch with your, help you get centered and help you get relaxed. And so, and some of these mindfulness techniques are taught in the zones of regulation, like different breathing techniques and cognitive behavioral kinds of strategies, like concerning what am I thinking about and how can I change my thoughts, and is this problem really as big as I think it is, because maybe I'm blown out of proportion. So those are skills that I think even we as adults have a hard time wrapping our heads around sometimes. And so I think it's really great to have those lessons that we can help our students to understand how to regulate their emotions. those zones lessons are taught from learning how to recognize the zones in other people and then in myself, and then how do I manage those zones? What kind of strategies do I use to help me get through that red zone, or which would be typically thought of as anger, and then or sadness is the blue zone, could be the blue zone, and how do I get through that? And then yellow's more about being just sort of keyed up and a lot of energy, and so how do I regulate that kind of what's going on inside me so that I can be at my best, and so I can interact more appropriately with others, because when we're dysregulated and we're not thinking clearly, then we tend to be impulsive and not do our best work with relationships and those that we care about most. Tend to say things and do things that we regret later. So it's important that the students and all of us understand what we're feeling and what that looks like and what kind of zone that is and how can I regulate myself so that I can still manage that emotion and still get my needs met, because emotions are just another way to communicate that there's a problem and that we need to use those emotions to help us solve that problem in a constructive and appropriate way. And the zones do a great job of teaching that. And so in a number of our schools, we have some groups that they do the zone groups, and they go from lesson 1 to lesson 18, 19, I can't remember how many there are, but anyway, and it's a progression of learning how to manage those, starting with identifying them and then using strategies to help myself get back in control so that I can make this work for me and get my needs met. And so a lot of the schools have those groups and opportunities to learn how to regulate their emotions. So that's the zones of regulation. As far as yoga and mindfulness goes, I was a little bit hesitant in the beginning about that, and Labona can attest to that. But after seeing it in real time and watching, getting trained in yoga and mindfulness, and then actually leading groups, I saw the power in those kids learning how to regulate and understand themselves a bit better and connecting with others socially. Then we actually even got someone trained in each school so that we could lead, or that school could have its own yoga mindfulness kind of curriculum that they could create for that school specifically.
Thanks, Alan.
Hey,
Just kind of,
can I add something to that yoga mindfulness
you bet.
real quick? So one thing for the participants that are the attendees, when we talk about yoga and mindfulness at our school, and I think everywhere, we need to remember when we talk about yoga, it's not the focusing on the Middle Eastern religious yoga, that aspect. It's stretching and really being physical. And then when we talk about the mindfulness, it's just teaching strategies that even us as adults use when we need to refocus, when we need to calm down. So like deep breathing, or if your mind's wandering, getting up and taking a walk, getting a drink, and then coming back and refocusing. And so at our school, we kind of waited on the yoga because, like Alan, I wasn't quite sold at first until I had some students come down. And I feel really strongly middle school students need to be able to have some choice in their education to want to be here. So we had a group of students come down and say, hey, can we have yoga during lunch? We're really bored at lunch. We don't want to sit in the lunchroom. We don't want to go outside and play basketball. Is there any way we can have a yoga group during lunch? And so that's how it started at our school. And I think it was just awesome. The kids wanted it, and totally voluntary. We do it at lunch times, and whoever wants to hop in and do stretching, or they think it looks fun that day, they hop in. And so that's been a huge thing for our school, that was student generated as well.
Thanks, Melinda. I think, just to kind of wrap things up, as we've talked about this, there's some statistics that kind of hit home. And one of those statistics is that 1 out of every 4 children will experience at least one adverse experience in their life. And that could be from multiple things: divorce, death, any of those types of things that can cause an adverse reaction or whatever to a child. But to put that into perspective from our school district, that means that 2,500 of our kids have at least had one adverse childhood experience that affects them. Now, not all of them are going to have the same experience with that. If there's a significant person in their life that can help those children through those experiences, then they're going to be fine. But what I've found, and I think what Roy alluded to and Belinda alluded to and all of us on the panel alluded to, is that there are so many students out there that don't have these tools or these relationships, I guess I could say, in their lives to be able to help them through those experiences. And I think what this has done for us in the Iron County School District is it's given us the opportunity to reach all students. There's lots of opportunities for us as teachers, as administrators, throughout this district to make a difference in children's lives. And this is just one way that we can go ahead and do that in our district. And so it's, to me, this has been a process that we've implemented that has saved lives, that has changed lives, and that certainly has changed my thinking when it comes to our relationships and what kids have gone through. Like I've mentioned this before, some of the things meetings I've had to sit through and listen to the experiences that kids have gone through in homes or just in the community and things that they do. It would set all of us back on our heels. We wouldn't even understand or believe that this is going on. And so it gives us the opportunity to be able to work with these students. And I feel blessed that we have it in our schools to be able, at our fingertips, for our teachers to use and our administrators to use. Some questions. It looks like we've got any social and emotional learning that is online. I think I'm not getting them all. I'm sorry, I'm missing some of these. Options for student learning online and not in physical school classrooms. Any of this curriculum can be used for online. So there are options. That would be something that would need to be discussed through the administration and being able to access that way. But that certainly is an option and something that can be done.
Kevin, the question or comment just before that from Ray, let's revisit this from the perspective of the needs of teachers.
And I did see that, so as a comment, and we'll certainly look at that and visit with Ray about that. So
can I add to, I think there were two, Timothy, both the online. Many of our students that are online in Iron County School District this year can still receive services in the building. So if that's the case and your student is on K6 or the Spark program, just call the building that they would be in and we can help you kind of find those services. Our social worker can work through Zoom. It's not ideal, obviously, because there's not a lot of confidentiality for the student, but they can work through Zoom or we can make arrangements. So if that's a concern, just make sure you call the building where your student would attend and we'll find a way to help you with that. That's speaking from as a principal. So
thank you to our panel. We appreciate you guys being on here and sharing your vast knowledge when it comes to social and emotional education. And certainly you guys are in the buildings. You're the ones that are kind of like with the teachers, the foot soldiers that are taking care of this. So thank you so much for your perspective and for what you're doing for kids. And that comes from my heart. I appreciate everything and appreciate those that were participating here today as well. I hope that if you have questions, you'll feel free to contact anybody here at the district that spoke today and ask those questions. We're more than happy to visit with you and help you understand the process and how we got to this point. So thank you very much.
And Kevin, I'm wondering if Michelle and Superintendent Delaney would have anything to add.
Okay.
They're both on.
Anything there?
I'll just jump in really quick and just say thank you. I love what I heard today. I see that it's really focused on meeting students' needs. And I see also a real desire to work with parents. And so I'd encourage people who do have questions to really do contact their administrator and the principal, whoever that is that's in their area. Because there are always, good reasons to have questions. And I think that the principal is really in a good position to help connect them to services and get them in touch. That this can be a collaborative effort with parents. So thank you for all of you for taking the time to share this information. and thank you for addressing this really great need.
Thanks, Michelle. Shannon, are you still on?
Yes, Kevin, thanks. I'll just take a few seconds here just to, can I say amen to everything that's been said, and how appreciative I am for the phenomenal leadership as well as support. Our school psychologists and social workers and counselors and everyone who's been a part of this monumental, it really is a monumental effort. Just a great appreciation for those services, and thank you. And for those who, we had about 20 participants today, so thank you to all who participated. And again, just reiterate what Kevin said, and our doors are always open, and we welcome questions and input. So thank you all.
Thank you.